Hello, I'm Dr. Charlie Collins. Let's talk about research methods. So I'm coming at you with a wicked case of the bubons, hence the Rainier's hat and the pony shirt. I'm going a little bit chill for today, so bear with me. Today I'm going to talk about secondary data. I will discuss the various sources of secondary data, the process of secondary data analysis, and I'll leave you with some concepts to consider. So first, what is secondary data? Also known as existing data. There are two forms of data, primary and secondary. Primary data is data that's collected by the researcher directly. The researcher is the primary source of data collection. Secondary data, on the other hand, is data that already exists. In other words, it was collected previously by somebody else or some other institution. Secondary data sources exist in both quantitative and qualitative forms, and can be placed in 5 broad categories. First are public documents, archives, or records. Examples of these include census data, vital statistics such as death rates, birth rates, and historical records, for example. Second are private documents, which are documentations or documents about private persons, such as a diary or a private organization or business. Third, mass media, in the form of books, newspapers, television, and radio, for example, can provide a rich source of secondary data. It's fairly ubiquitous. Fourth are social science data archives, which are typically research projects undertaken by large research institutions or foundations that make their data publicly or semi-publicly available. The Gates Foundation is one of these, for example, and they may collect a variety of social science data and house that for use for the public good. Fifth and finally are physically or nonverbal artifacts, such as art or cave paintings, that may be of interest to people like archaeologists or artists. The topic of secondary data analysis is fairly large and extensive. Scholars from medical researchers to art researchers use secondary data to conduct their work. As such, using secondary data analysis can often be more of an art than a science. Additionally, analyses of secondary data can either be quantitative or qualitative, depending on the data source and the research question. As such, I don't want to go into specific detail about things such as the process of content analysis. Much of this will be covered later in the series when I discuss qualitative and qualitative data analyses. Here, I want to outline a general process of using secondary data analysis. Generally, this process will take place across 6 steps. 6 of them. First, and perhaps most importantly, is identifying your research question. As with all research, your question should lead to your methods. If your question fits into secondary data, use secondary data. Second is identifying the data source. Because of the diverse and predetermined nature of secondary data, finding exact data to fit your question may be difficult. You can't change secondary data, so often researchers may need to slightly adjust their research question to fit the data a little bit better. Third is identifying, operationalizing, and measuring your constructs. Again, this will look slightly different depending on your research question, source, and method. Fourth is developing a coding and/or measurement strategy. Flowing from your operationalization and leaning on your data, you must decide how to code your qualitative and/or quantitative data, how to measure your data, and how to understand your data. How are you making sense of the concepts that are being used to answer your research question? This is an important factor in developing a coding scheme and operationalization. Fifth, you need to analyze your data. Again, I will discuss both quantitative and qualitative analyses later in the series. This looks different depending on your question. The analysis phase seeks to identify patterns in the data, and for quantitative researchers, seeks to identify relationships in the data. Sixth and final is interpreting your analysis. Once you analyze your data, what's your analysis telling you? What's your data telling you? How does this data and how does this analysis inform your research question? This is the part of interpretation that we need to do. Well, that's all we have for this discussion on secondary data. By now, you should be familiar with the various sources of data analysis and the process of secondary data analysis. But before we go, some concepts you should know that we may not have covered. First, Comparative historical analysis investigates cases over time to identify social, economic, and political processes. A codebook, which is another term, is used to operationalize your variables. This is essentially your dictionary of research concepts in your data and how you're coding those concepts. And content analysis is a type of qualitative data analysis that examines ideas within a qualitative document to identify certain themes or ideas within the document. That's all I have. Thank you for watching. I'm Dr. Charlie Collins, and see you next time.